When I finally escaped my narcissistic mother, a true story of manipulation, social media obsession, and finding freedom. Growing up in suburban Phoenix, Arizona, I genuinely believed I was the luckiest kid alive because I had what everyone called the cool mom. Everyone at Roosevelt Middle School knew my mom Stephanie, and honestly, she was impossible to miss. Picture this, a 35-year-old single mother who looked like she'd stepped straight out of a reality TV show, with perfectly blonde hair that she got touched up every 3 weeks at the most expensive salon in Scottsdale, designer everything from head to toe, and a body that she'd spent literally thousands of dollars maintaining through multiple surgeries and an obsessive gym routine that took up at least 3 hours of every single day. Stephanie wasn't just attractive, though. She was magnetic in that dangerous way that draws absolutely everyone's attention, whether they want to give it or not. Think Regina George's mum from Mean Girls, but multiply that by 10 and add a serious Instagram obsession with zero boundaries whatsoever. She had this whole pink aesthetic going on that was honestly kind of overwhelming when you think about it now. Pink Range Rover that she leased, even though we could barely afford rent some months, pink workout clothes that cost more than most people's entire wardrobes, pink everything really, from her phone case to her yoga mat to the throw pillows in our apartment. Her Instagram account had over 50,000 followers at its peak, and I'm not exaggerating when I say she treated her social media presence like it was literally her full-time job, because in a lot of ways it actually was. When I was younger, maybe around 10 or 11 years old, I genuinely loved having Stephanie as my mum, and I thought I was so incredibly fortunate. She'd take me shopping at all the trendiest stores in Scottsdale Fashion Square, spending hours helping me pick out outfits that made me feel sophisticated and grown up way beyond my actual years. We'd get matching manicures at this super fancy nail salon where they served champagne to the adults and fancy sparkling cider to kids. And she'd let me wear makeup to school events when literally all the other mums were saying their daughters were too young for that kind of thing. I felt special and chosen, like I had this amazing, unique relationship that other kids could only dream of having with their boring, regular mothers who wore sensible shoes and asked about homework instead of teaching their daughters how to contour their cheekbones. But looking back now with adult eyes and years of therapy behind me, I can see that even those seemingly sweet moments had this really performative quality that should have been a red flag from the very beginning. She wasn't just spending quality mother-daughter time with me because she wanted to bond, or because she enjoyed my company, or because she was interested in who I was as a person. She was curating content for her social media empire. Every single shopping trip became an elaborate photo shoot with multiple outfit changes and different lighting setups. Every meal out at a restaurant was an opportunity for her to post about being a blessed mama, living her best life with her mini-me. She'd spend literally 20 minutes getting the perfect shot of our food before we were allowed to eat it, and then another 10 minutes taking photos of us pretending to laugh and have fun while our meals got cold. She'd caption these photos with things like my mini-me and I conquering the weekend like the boss babes we are, or teaching my daughter how to slay, because confidence is everything, #mom-daughter goals, #blessed mama, #Phoenix life, #living our best life, #grateful. The shift in our relationship started happening when I turned 12 and entered 7th grade at Roosevelt Middle School. And that's when the boys in my class started noticing my mom during school pickup time. And oh my God, did she notice them noticing her. The first time it happened, I was absolutely mortified beyond belief. I was walking toward her car after school, just minding my own business and thinking about the math test I had the next day, when I heard Tyler and Brandon, these two 8th graders who were definitely old enough to know better, talking behind me without even trying to be quiet or discreet about it. Tyler said, and I remember this exactly because the words are burned into my memory, dude. Harper's mum is like, seriously, wow, and he said it loud enough that half the pickup line could probably hear him. Brandon replied, using language that made me want to disappear into the ground. I know, right, she's got that whole thing going on that older guys talk about. and he used a specific term that I had to look up on the internet later and immediately wished I hadn't, because once you know what that word means, you can never unknown it. When I got in the car that day, my face was burning with embarrassment and I felt sick to my stomach. I said to my mum, hoping and praying that she would be just as disgusted as I was, "Mum, the boys at school are saying really weird and inappropriate things about you," and I expected her to be shocked and concerned and maybe even angry that these kids were being so disrespectful. Instead of the reaction I was hoping for, something that would make me feel like my mum was on my side and understood how uncomfortable this made me, her eyes actually lit up like she'd just won the lottery. She started giggling, and it wasn't a normal adult laugh, but this high-pitched teenage girl giggle that sounded completely wrong coming from a woman in her 30s. "Really?" she asked with obvious excitement. "What kind of things are they saying exactly?" I should have recognized this as a massive red flag right then and there, but I was only 12 years old, and I still believed with all my heart that my mum had my best interests at heart and would always protect me from anything that made me uncomfortable. From that day forward, and I mean literally the very next day, her school pickup outfits got more and more revealing in ways that were impossible not to notice. Tank tops with spaghetti straps that showed off the enhanced cleavage she'd paid a plastic surgeon in Scottsdale $15,000 to create. Yoga pants that were so tight they left absolutely nothing to the imagination and were practically see-through when she bent over or stretched, and sundresses that barely covered her thighs and rode up every time she got in and out of her car. She'd roll down all the windows and blast music that was way too loud for a school pickup line, sometimes getting out of the car completely to stretch or fix her hair or check something in the trunk, always making sure to position herself in full view of the gathering crowd of teenage boys who were starting to congregate near her parking spot every single day. The worst part wasn't even just the increasingly inappropriate outfits, which were bad enough on their own. The worst part was watching her actually interact with these kids, these 13 and 14-year-old boys who should have been completely off limits to any reasonable adult woman. She would flirt with them, and I mean actual, intentional, calculated flirting with children. She'd bat her eyelashes like she was auditioning for a commercial, speak in this breathy voice that sounded like a cartoon character, and make jokes that had sexual undertones that I was too young to fully understand, but definitely old enough to know were completely inappropriate and wrong on every possible level. One day that I will never forget as long as I live, she accidentally spilled her iced coffee all over her white shirt right in front of the main school entrance where everyone could see. Of course she wasn't wearing a bra underneath. Of course she made this huge dramatic show of cleaning herself up while making these little gasping sounds, like she was surprised and embarrassed. And of course she had me take pictures of the whole thing with her phone, claiming it was for insurance purposes in case she needed to prove her shirt was ruined, while literally dozens of my classmates watched the entire spectacle in a mixture of horror and fascination. I stood there holding her phone, taking photos of my half-naked mother in front of my school, wanting to disappear or die or both, while she posed and adjusted her hair and made sure the lighting was good enough for social media. That night, she posted those photos on Instagram with some ridiculous caption about coffee shop fails. And when you're running late but life happens, #authentic moments, #real life, #mum struggles, #Phoenix mornings, #grateful for everything. The likes and comments poured in from men of all ages within minutes of her posting, and I watched her scroll through them with this satisfied, almost predatory smile on her face, reading out loud the ones that she thought were particularly flattering or funny. She'd say things like, "Oh, this one's sweet, listen to this, Harper," and then read comments from random men telling her how beautiful she was, or asking if she was single, or making suggestions about what they'd like to do if they ever met her in person. As I got older and entered high school at Desert Ridge Prep, the situation became increasingly unbearable, and I started to realize that what was happening in our house wasn't normal mother-daughter behavior. By this point, Stephanie had absolutely perfected her act and refined it to an art form. She wasn't just the hot mom anymore, she was the mum who treated literally every single man who crossed her path like potential content for her ever-growing social media empire. Going grocery shopping with her became like watching a one-woman performance art piece that was both fascinating and horrifying to observe. She'd wear tight dresses to Target that were completely inappropriate for running errands, flirt shamelessly with teenage bag boys who were probably younger than some of her Instagram followers, and somehow always managed to need help reaching items on high shelves whenever there were attractive men around to notice her struggling. She'd position herself in these ridiculous poses that were clearly designed for maximum visual impact, and then ask me to take photos of her naturally shopping or candidly selecting produce, as if anyone actually needed 17 different angles of someone choosing between two types of apples. "Harper, get a shot of me reaching for those organic tomatoes, but make sure you catch my good side and try to get the lighting from that window over there," she'd say, in her loudest voice, completely oblivious to the fact that everyone in the entire produce section was stopping their own shopping to stare at the woman directing a photo shoot in the grocery store while her teenage daughter died of embarrassment. The flirting and attention-seeking behavior extended to literally every service worker who crossed our path, and I mean every single one without exception. Pizza delivery guys who just wanted to drop off food and get their tip, Uber Eats drivers who were trying to make a living, maintenance workers at our apartment complex who were just trying to do their jobs. Literally no one was safe from her need to be seen and validated and desired. She'd answer the door in revealing robes that barely covered anything important, lean in way too close when signing receipts so that her cleavage was impossible to ignore, and always find completely unnecessary excuses to keep these workers talking way longer than was appropriate or professional, asking them personal questions about their lives and their jobs and their relationships, while touching their arms and laughing too loudly at things that weren't even supposed to be funny. But despite all of this increasingly inappropriate and embarrassing behavior that was making my life at school more difficult every single day, there was still one thing about my mum that kept me hanging on to our relationship and made me believe that maybe she really did love me in her own complicated way. She could make me laugh like absolutely no one else in the world could when she wanted to. When I'd have a terrible day at school, which was happening more and more frequently as word about my mum's antics spread through the gossip networks of Phoenix area teenagers, she'd somehow know exactly what to say to make me feel better about everything and forget about all the embarrassing things she'd done that week. "Honey, just forget about those basic girls and their boring opinions," she'd say, while pulling me onto the couch with a pint of Ben & Jerry's ice cream and her undivided attention. "They're just jealous because their mums look like soccer coaches who shop exclusively at Target's clearance section, and you've got a mum who could literally be a model or an Instagram influencer. We're a power team, baby girl, and they wish they had what we have." She'd validate my appearance and my worth in ways that felt absolutely amazing at the time, and made me feel like I was special and chosen and destined for great things. "You've got my good genes, Harper, and that means you're going to be absolutely stunning when you grow up. These awkward teenage years are just temporary growing pains, but beautiful is forever, and you've definitely got that covered." Looking back now with the benefit of hindsight and a lot of therapy, I can see that she was teaching me that my worth as a person was directly tied to my physical appearance and my ability to get attention from men. But in the moment, having my mum tell me I was beautiful and special felt like everything I needed to hear. The problem was, and this became more and more obvious as time went on, this emotional support and validation was completely conditional on my behavior and my willingness to play along with her games and her social media schemes. If I got good grades that she could brag about online, if I looked pretty in the photos she wanted to take, if I went along with her plans without complaining or asking too many questions, then I was worthy of love and attention and praise. But if I didn't, if I pushed back or expressed discomfort or tried to set any kind of boundaries, I might as well have been completely invisible to her. I remember being 13 years old and desperately wanting my mum to come to my school's talent show, where I was going to perform a piano piece that I'd been working on for literally months, practicing every single day after school until my fingers were sore and I could play it perfectly from memory. She promised me multiple times that she would absolutely be there, and that she was so proud of me and couldn't wait to see me perform and show everyone how talented her daughter was. When the time came for the actual performance, I kept looking out into the audience during the other kids' acts, searching for her face in the crowd and getting more and more anxious as the minutes ticked by, and she was nowhere to be found. After my performance was over and I realized she had missed the entire thing, I found out later that she had gone to some wine bar in Scottsdale to meet a guy she'd matched with on a dating app, some divorced real estate agent who had been sending her messages for weeks and finally convinced her to meet him in person. When I confronted her about missing my performance, something I had been looking forward to and practicing for months, she was already getting ready for another date with someone else and barely looked up from her makeup mirror. "Sweetie, I'm so sorry, but you know how incredibly proud I am of you no matter what," she said, while applying false eyelashes. "Besides, you did absolutely great without me there, and that just shows how strong and independent you're becoming, which is exactly what I'm trying to teach you." It was always like that with her. Every single time something important to me got pushed aside for her social life, or her content creation, or her need for male attention. Every disappointment or neglect got reframed as some kind of lesson in independence or character building. Every time she let me down became an opportunity for her to teach me about resilience and self-reliance. I started to internalize the message that needing emotional support from my mother was a sign of weakness, that I should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention she gave me, and that expecting her to prioritize my needs over her own desires was asking too much. When I turned 15, something shifted dramatically in our relationship dynamic, and it happened right around the time I got my first serious boyfriend. His name was Jake, and he was this really sweet junior who played guitar in the school jazz band and actually listened when I talked about my interests and my dreams, instead of just waiting for his turn to speak. For the first time in my life, I had someone who was genuinely interested in me as a person, not in my mum or her social media presence or the drama that seemed to follow our family everywhere we went, just me and my thoughts and my personality and my goals for the future. Suddenly, and I mean literally overnight, Stephanie perked up with this intense interest that felt different from her usual distracted attention. She wanted to know absolutely everything about Jake, and I mean everything. What did he look like? How tall was he? What color were his eyes? What did his parents do for work? Where did he want to go to college? What kind of car did he drive? Did he have any siblings? What was his Instagram handle so she could check out his photos? Did he play any sports? What kind of music was he into? Had he ever had a serious girlfriend before me? But these weren't the normal questions that a protective mother might ask about her daughter's first boyfriend. These were the kinds of detailed interrogations that someone might conduct when they're gathering intelligence for some kind of strategic operation. "Oh my God, Harper, this is so incredibly exciting," she squealed when I first told her about Jake, and her reaction was so over the top that it made me uncomfortable, even though I couldn't quite put my finger on why. "We need to plan this absolutely perfectly and make sure you handle this exactly right. What's he into? Like, what are his hobbies and interests? What kind of girls has he dated before? And what did they look like? And how did those relationships end? We need to make sure you're absolutely irresistible and that he never even thinks about looking at another girl while he's with you." She took me shopping for what she called my girlfriend wardrobe, spending hundreds of dollars that we didn't really have on clothes that were way too mature and revealing for a 15-year-old high school student. Crop tops that showed my midriff and made me look like I was trying to get into clubs instead of going to biology class. Shorts that barely covered anything and made me feel exposed and self-conscious. and makeup that was so dramatic it made me look at least 18 years old and completely different from my actual personality. At the time, I thought she was just being supportive and helping me feel confident and attractive and grown up. But looking back, I can see that she was basically trying to turn me into a younger version of herself. Then the conversation started, and these became like our new evening routine that I actually looked forward to because it felt like bonding time with my mum. Every single night after dinner, we'd sit on her huge king-sized bed surrounded by face masks and nail polish and fashion magazines, and we'd spend hours analysing every single text message that Jake had sent me, every interaction we'd had at school, every girl that he followed on social media, and whether or not she posed any kind of threat to our relationship. It felt like finally my mum was treating me like an equal, like a girlfriend she could share secrets with, like we were a team working together towards some common goal. "Okay, so he liked Madison's photo from last Tuesday," she'd say, while scrolling through his Instagram activity like she was conducting some kind of forensic investigation. "And look at her, Harper. She's got absolutely nothing on you in any possible way. She's so flat that she could literally use her chest as a surfboard, and don't even get me started on that nose. Did she break it playing field hockey, or was she just born unfortunate like that?" She'd make these incredibly cruel and cutting observations about other girls, while simultaneously building me up and making me feel superior and special and chosen. See how basic and ordinary she looks without all those filters and professional lighting. You're naturally gorgeous, baby. And these other girls need an entire photography team and a makeup artist just to look half as good as you do when you roll out of bed in the morning. At the time, this felt like the most amazing bonding experience I'd ever had with my mother, and it was exactly the kind of relationship I'd always dreamed we would have, where she'd treat me like her best friend, and we'd share secrets and talk about boys and relationships like equals. We'd spend hours and hours on her bed talking and laughing and planning, and for the first time in my life I felt like I had my mum's complete attention and approval and support. But looking back now, I realise how completely twisted and toxic it all was, and how she was teaching me to view other women as competition and threats, to base my entire sense of self-worth on male attention and approval, and to believe that manipulation and strategic game-playing were normal and healthy parts of romantic relationships. "Here's exactly what you're going to do," she'd say, while outlining these elaborate schemes that were designed to make Jake jealous or confused or more interested in me. And she'd lay out these detailed plans like she was some kind of relationship military strategist. "Post a photo of yourself in that blue bikini we bought last week, but don't tag him in it, and don't post it when you know he's online. Make him wonder who you're trying to look good for and why you're posting sexy photos when you're supposedly committed to him. Men are incredibly simple creatures, Harper, especially teenage boys, and they always want what they think they can't have or what they're afraid they might lose. Since literally all of my friends at the time talked exactly like this and had similar conversations with their own mothers or older sisters, I thought it was completely normal and healthy behavior, and that this was just how girls learn to navigate romantic relationships. We'd all gather around our phones during lunch, analysing every single thing that boys posted on social media and planning our own posts for maximum impact and emotional manipulation. It felt like we were all just learning how to be successful in love and dating together, sharing strategies and tips, and supporting each other through the complicated world of teenage relationships. The red flags didn't become obvious to me until I was a little older and started paying attention to how other parents interacted with their children's romantic relationships. I began to notice that my friends' parents asked different kinds of questions about their boyfriends and girlfriends, questions about character and values and goals, and how these people treated their children. They wanted to know if their kids felt respected and supported and happy in their relationships, not whether their partners had seen their latest Instagram posts or how many likes their photos were getting from other potential romantic interests. The first real crack in my perception of our relationship happened during my junior year at Desert Ridge Prep, when I was 17 years old. And it centered around Jake breaking up with me after we'd been together for almost 2 years. I was absolutely devastated, and not just because I'd lost my first love and someone who had become such an important part of my daily life, but because I felt like I'd lost my entire identity as a person. For 2 whole years, I'd been Jake's girlfriend, and without that label and that relationship to define me, I honestly didn't know who I was supposed to be or what my purpose was, or how I was supposed to move through the world. I went to my mum that day expecting comfort and support and understanding, maybe some ice cream and a movie night where she'd tell me that everything would be okay and that I was worthy of love regardless of my relationship status. What I got instead was basically a masterclass in everything that was wrong with our entire relationship and her approach to parenting and her understanding of what love and support actually look like. Instead of hugging me or acknowledging my emotional pain or asking how I was feeling or what I needed from her in that moment, she immediately went into what I now recognize as her fix-it mode. But her version of fixing my broken heart was absolutely disturbing and inappropriate. "Here's exactly what we're going to do, Harper," she said, while already pulling out her phone to start shopping online, and her tone was excited and energetic, like she'd been waiting for this opportunity to put some plan into action. "I'm ordering you this absolutely amazing outfit that I saw on Fashion Nova last week. It's basically a bikini that pretends to be a dress, and it's going to make every guy within a 50-mile radius completely lose his mind when he sees you in it. We're going to hit Club Rio this weekend, and I'll get you a perfect fake ID that'll get you into anywhere you want to go. Trust me, baby. The absolute best way to get over someone is to get under someone new. And there are going to be so many hot guys at that club who would kill for a chance to take you home." I stared at her in complete shock and disbelief, because Club Rio was this notorious pickup spot in Scottsdale where men in their 30s and 40s went specifically to find young women who were barely legal, or sometimes not even legal yet. The idea of my own mother taking me to a place like that and actively encouraging me to hook up with random strangers to get over my first heartbreak felt fundamentally wrong on every possible level, like a violation of everything that motherhood was supposed to represent. "Mum, I really don't want to go to clubs and meet random guys that I don't know anything about," I said while trying to keep my voice steady even though I felt like crying. "I just want to feel better about everything that happened and maybe process my emotions in a healthy way. Can't we just watch movies and eat ice cream like normal families do when someone's going through a hard time?" She looked at me like I'd suggested that we perform interpretive dance in the middle of the grocery store or something equally ridiculous and incomprehensible. "Harper, sweetie, ice cream and sad movies aren't going to fix a broken heart or make you feel better about yourself," she said, with this tone like she was explaining something incredibly obvious to a small child. "Male attention and validation will make you feel better, and getting back out there and showing everyone, including Jake, that you're a catch and that you've moved on is the best possible thing you can do for your self-esteem. The best revenge is looking absolutely incredible and being completely unavailable and mysterious. And that's exactly what we're going to accomplish this weekend." That night, lying in my bed and staring at the ceiling while trying to process everything that had happened, I realized something that genuinely scared me more than anything else that had happened in our relationship up to that point. I felt more alone and isolated when I was with my mum than I did when I was actually by myself. The loneliness that had been gnawing at my chest for months and months, this feeling like I was carrying around this heavy weight that I couldn't put down or explain to anyone, became absolutely impossible to ignore or rationalize away anymore. I'd been spending every night since the breakup lying in my bed and staring at the white walls of my room, wrapping my arms around myself and pretending that someone was holding me, that someone actually understood what I was going through and cared about my feelings, instead of immediately trying to fix me or use my situation for their own entertainment or validation. I'd imagine conversations where someone, anyone, actually listened to what I was saying and responded with empathy instead of immediately jumping to solutions that had nothing to do with what I actually needed or wanted. But when I tried to have these kinds of conversations with my mum, when I tried to express my actual feelings about the breakup or about anything else that was going on in my life, she would immediately redirect everything back to appearance and male attention and social media strategy. It was like she spoke a completely different language from me, one where emotions were inconvenient interruptions to the main business of looking good and getting likes and maintaining her image as the fun, cool mom who had everything figured out. Despite all of my reservations and my growing sense that something was fundamentally wrong with the way my mum approached basically everything in life, I eventually agreed to go to a party with my friends. Not Club Rio, because that was absolutely where I drew the line and refused to compromise, but a house party that was being thrown by some seniors from Pinnacle High School, which was this other school in our district that had a reputation for having students whose parents had more money than sense. My reasoning for agreeing to go was pretty simple, and honestly kind of desperate. Maybe getting out of the house and socializing with people my own age would help me feel less isolated and disconnected from the rest of the world. The party was at this absolutely massive house in Paradise Valley, one of those sprawling mansions that screamed old money and generational wealth, with a pool that was bigger than most people's entire backyards and more cars in the driveway than I'd ever seen in one place before. My friend Emma was supposed to be our designated driver for the evening since she'd recently gotten her license, and was still in that responsible phase where she took driving very seriously and hadn't started taking stupid risks yet. Everything was actually going really well for the first few hours of the party, much better than I had expected it to go, given my emotional state and my general anxiety about social situations. I was talking to people I'd never met before, laughing for the first time since the breakup, and starting to feel like maybe I could exist as an individual person rather than just half of a relationship that no longer existed. I was having actual conversations about books and movies and college plans, and for a few hours I felt like maybe I was going to be okay, and that life would continue to have meaning and purpose, even without Jake in it. Then Emma made a decision that changed absolutely everything about how the night was going to end, and it was a decision that I should have seen coming, but was too caught up in feeling normal and happy to pay attention to the warning signs that were right in front of me. Emma had been flirting with this college guy for most of the night, and when he offered her a drink, she accepted it without really thinking about the consequences, or remembering that she was supposed to be responsible for getting 3 other people home safely. Then she had another drink, and then another one after that. And by the time we were all ready to leave the party and head home, she was in absolutely no condition to drive anyone anywhere, let alone navigate the winding roads between Paradise Valley and our neighborhood. "I'm totally fine to drive," she insisted, while swaying slightly and digging through her purse for her keys, and her words were slurred just enough that it was obvious to everyone except her that she was lying to herself. I only had like 2 drinks, maybe 3, but they were really small, and I had a lot of food earlier, so it's totally fine, and I can definitely handle getting us home safely. My other friends were already getting into the car and acting like this was no big deal, but something deep in my gut told me that this was going to end very badly and that I should trust my instincts instead of going along with what everyone else wanted to do. I'd seen enough public service announcements about drunk driving and heard enough stories about teenagers dying in preventable accidents to know that Emma's definition of fine was probably not accurate, and that getting in a car with her would be incredibly dangerous. "Emma, maybe we should just call an Uber or ask someone sober to give us a ride home," I suggested, but she was already starting the engine, and everyone else was telling me not to be such a mom and to stop overthinking everything and just get in the car so we could all go home. "Don't be such a killjoy, Harper," Emma laughed, and everyone else in the car giggled like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard, instead of a potential life or death situation. "We're only like 15 minutes from your house and the roads are totally empty at this time of night. What's the worst that could happen?" I should have trusted my instincts and called my mum for a ride, or stayed at the party until Emma sobered up, or found another way home that didn't involve getting into a car with someone who was clearly impaired. Instead, I got into that car because I didn't want to be the dramatic one who ruined everyone's fun and made a big scene about something that everyone else seemed to think was perfectly fine and normal. We made it about 3 miles from the party, which felt like forever when you're sitting in a car with someone who's having trouble staying in their lane and keeps overcorrecting every time they start to drift toward the shoulder. Then Emma lost complete control on this curve along Tatum Boulevard that she'd driven hundreds of times before, and we slammed straight into a tree at what felt like full speed, but was probably around 40 miles per hour. The sound of the impact is something that I will never forget as long as I live, this horrible combination of screeching tires and crushing metal and shattering glass, followed by this sudden, terrifying silence that made me think for a few seconds that maybe I had died and this was what death felt like. Emma took the worst of the impact because she was in the driver's seat and didn't have the protection that the rest of us had as passengers. She ended up with a pretty serious concussion and a broken collarbone, but thankfully nothing that was going to be permanently disabling or life-threatening, which was honestly a miracle considering how bad the accident could have been. The rest of us had what the paramedics classified as minor injuries, which included cuts from broken glass, some bruising from our seatbelts, and shock more than anything else. But even minor injuries feel pretty major when you're 17 years old and experiencing your first real brush with your own mortality. When the ambulance and police arrived at the scene and the paramedics were checking all of us over and asking questions about what had happened, I did something that seems absolutely insane to me now when I look back on it, but made perfect sense to my 17-year-old brain that was still conditioned to reach out to my mother whenever I was scared or hurt or needed someone to take care of me. I called my mum and asked her to come to the hospital because in that moment of vulnerability and fear and adrenaline crash, my instinct was still to reach out to the person who was supposed to love me unconditionally and protect me from the scary things in the world. She arrived at Banner Desert Medical Center about an hour after I called her, which should have been enough time for her to throw on some normal clothes and drive over to make sure I was okay and provide whatever comfort and support I needed. When she walked into the emergency room, I'll never forget the moment I saw her and realized what she had chosen to prioritize in the hour since I called her from the scene of a car accident. I was sitting on one of those hospital beds with the paper covers, still shaking from adrenaline and shock, with several bandages on my arms from where glass had cut me, and probably looking like I'd been through something genuinely traumatic and scary. I expected her to run over and hug me immediately, to ask if I was okay, and whether I needed anything, and whether I was in pain or scared or traumatized by what had happened. I expected her to be a mother in that moment, to put my emotional and physical needs ahead of absolutely everything else, and focus entirely on making sure I felt safe and loved and taken care of. Instead, the very first thing she did when she saw me was pull out her phone and start looking for the best camera angle and lighting setup in the emergency room. "Oh my God, Harper, this is actually perfect," she said. And I want to be very clear that she said this with genuine excitement and enthusiasm, not with concern or worry or any of the emotions that a normal mother would be feeling in this situation. "You look so vulnerable and beautiful right now, and the lighting in here is actually amazing for photos if we position you correctly. Can you move a little more to the left so the fluorescent lights hit your face better? And maybe try to look a little bit sadder and more scared than you already do." I sat there in complete shock and disbelief as my own mother directed me in an impromptu photo shoot that used my trauma and my injuries and my emotional distress as props for her social media content. She took dozens and dozens of photos from different angles, photos of me looking scared and vulnerable, Photos of her looking concerned and motherly while positioning herself next to my hospital bed. Photos of both of us together with her comforting me and stroking my hair while I tried to process what was happening and whether this was actually real life or some kind of nightmare that I was going to wake up from. "This is going to get incredible engagement," she murmured, while scrolling through the photos she'd just taken to pick out the best ones for posting. And she was already composing captions in her head while I sat there bleeding and traumatized. People absolutely love authentic moments like this, and it's going to show everyone what an amazing mother I am, and how much I love my daughter, and how I'm always there for her when she needs me most. The photos were posted to her Instagram account before we had even finished with the discharge paperwork and left the hospital. While I was filling out forms and trying to remember details about my insurance coverage and answering questions about my medical history, she was crafting the perfect caption that would maximize the emotional impact and the number of likes and comments she would get from this situation. The caption she eventually settled on read, "Scariest night of my entire life as a mother. My beautiful baby girl was in a car accident tonight, and I have never been more grateful that she's okay and safe and still with me. Please hug your children extra tight tonight and remember that life is precious and can change in an instant. Hashtag blessed, hashtag grateful mama, hashtag life is fragile, hashtag prayers up, hashtag Phoenix strong, hashtag never take anything for granted." The absolute worst part of this entire situation wasn't even the way she exploited my trauma for social media content, which was horrible enough on its own to probably scar me for life. The worst part was the way she had chosen to dress for her trip to the hospital to check on her injured daughter who had just been in a serious car accident. She had come to the emergency room wearing a low-cut red dress that barely covered her thighs, paired with heels that were completely inappropriate for a hospital setting and clicked loudly on the tile floors every time she moved. Her makeup was absolutely perfect, like she'd spent an hour getting ready for a date instead of rushing to make sure her child was okay. Her hair was styled and curled and sprayed into place, and she looked like she was heading to a nightclub rather than a medical emergency involving her own daughter. The universe has a funny way of delivering justice sometimes, and maybe it was the completely inappropriate outfit, or maybe it was the obvious photo shoot happening in a hospital emergency room, or maybe it was just incredibly bad timing. But those photos went viral within hours of being posted, and not in the way that my mum had intended or hoped for when she was planning her content strategy in the hospital bathroom. When I woke up the next morning, still sore from the accident and emotionally drained from the entire experience, I had no idea that our lives were about to be completely turned upside down, and that my mum's social media obsession was finally going to have real consequences that couldn't be laughed off or explained away. The photos had been shared thousands and thousands of times overnight, but they weren't getting the kind of positive engagement and sympathetic comments that my mum had been expecting when she posted them. People were commenting, but they weren't sending prayers and heart emojis and telling her what an amazing mother she was. Instead, they were asking really uncomfortable questions about why a mother would bring what looked like a professional camera crew to her daughter's medical emergency, why she was dressed like she was going to a nightclub instead of a hospital, and whether this looked like appropriate parental behavior to anyone else who was seeing these photos and trying to make sense of what was actually happening in them. The doorbell rang at exactly 9 in the morning, which was early enough to wake both of us up and let us know that whoever was at the door probably had official business that couldn't wait. Through the peephole, I could see this serious-looking woman in a business suit holding a clipboard and an official-looking badge, and my stomach immediately dropped because even before she introduced herself, I knew exactly what this visit was about and why she was standing on our doorstep at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. "Miss Morrison," she said when my mum opened the door, "I'm Sarah Chen from the Arizona Department of Child Safety, and we've received multiple reports expressing concern about the well-being of the minor child in this household. Based on the nature of these reports, I'm going to need to speak with both you and your daughter this morning, and I'll also need to conduct a brief inspection of your home to ensure that it meets basic safety standards for a child. May I please come inside so we can discuss this situation? I watched my mother's entire demeanor and personality change in real time, like someone had flipped a switch that transformed her from her normal self into this completely different person who was designed specifically to charm and manipulate authority figures. The panic that flashed across her face for just a split second was quickly replaced by what I had come to recognize as her public performance mode, where her posture straightened and her voice became softer and more breathy, and she immediately went into full charm offensive mode like her life depended on it. "Of course, please come right in and make yourself comfortable," Stephanie said, while ushering the social worker into our living room and gesturing toward our nicest chair like she was welcoming an old friend instead of a government investigator. "I'm so sorry that you had to come out here this morning, and I'm sure this is just some kind of terrible misunderstanding based on people taking things completely out of context. You know how social media can be these days. People see one photo or read one caption, and they think they understand an entire situation without knowing any of the background or the real story behind what actually happened. What happened next was like watching a masterclass in manipulation and emotional abuse, except instead of being impressed, I was horrified because I was watching my own mother deploy these tactics against someone who was there to protect me. Ms. Chen was clearly a professional who had been doing this job for years and had probably seen every trick and manipulation tactic in the book. But my mum wasn't deterred by her serious demeanor or her obvious experience with these kinds of situations. "Can I offer you some coffee or maybe some herbal tea?" Stephanie said, while making sure to mention that we shopped at upscale stores and could afford nice things. "I just got this amazing organic blend from Whole Foods that's supposed to be really calming and stress-reducing, which seems like exactly what we all need right now. Harper, honey, come over here and say hello to Ms. Chen so she can see what a wonderful, well-adjusted daughter I have and how close our relationship is." I was brought into the living room like a prop in my mother's performance, and she positioned me next to her on the couch in a way that was meant to demonstrate what a loving, close-knit family we were. As you can clearly see, Harper is perfectly healthy and happy and well cared for, and we have the most wonderful relationship that any mother and daughter could hope for. She's honestly my entire world, and everything I do is focused on giving her the best possible life and preparing her for success and happiness in the future. Ms. Chen asked me some basic questions about school and homework and friends, about how I felt living at home and whether I ever felt unsafe or uncomfortable or scared of anything. With my mum sitting right there next to me, staring at me with this intensity that was disguised as motherly concern but felt more like a threat, I gave all the right answers that I knew she wanted to hear. Yes, I felt completely safe at home. Yes, my mum took excellent care of me and always made sure I had everything I needed. No, there weren't any problems in our household that anyone needed to be concerned about. The interview lasted about 30 or 40 minutes, during which Ms. Chen asked to see my bedroom, which my mum had obviously cleaned and organised that morning before I even woke up. She looked through our refrigerator to make sure we had adequate food and supplies, checked our bathroom for basic hygiene necessities, and reviewed some documents about my school attendance and medical care to verify that I was being properly cared for in all the ways that could be measured and documented. Throughout this entire visit, my mum maintained this absolutely perfect facade of concerned single motherhood, and her performance was so convincing that I almost started to believe it myself. She talked about how incredibly difficult it was to raise a teenager on her own without any help or support from family, how much she worried about me every single day and wanted to protect me from all the dangers and influences that could lead me down the wrong path, and how scared she had been after the car accident because she couldn't bear the thought of losing the most important person in her entire world. "I know the photos from last night probably looked inappropriate to people who don't understand the full context," she said, with these perfectly timed tears that started forming in her eyes at exactly the right moment in her explanation. But I was just so relieved and grateful that Harper was okay and safe and still with me that I wanted to document that moment of gratitude and share it with people who care about our family. Maybe I made some poor choices about how to express those feelings in the heat of the moment, but absolutely everything I do is because I love my daughter more than life itself, and I want to share that love with the world. Ms. Chen seemed satisfied with what she saw and heard during her visit, and she left some informational resources about family counseling services and community support programs for single mothers. She reminded my mum about the importance of maintaining appropriate boundaries when it came to social media and sharing information about minors online, and then she officially closed the case and left our apartment with what seemed like confidence that there weren't any serious problems that needed ongoing investigation or intervention. The moment that the front door closed behind her and we were alone again, my mother's entire personality and demeanor flipped like a light switch being turned off. And I got to see who she really was underneath all of the performance and manipulation that she'd been putting on for the social worker's benefit. "This is completely and entirely your fault," she said, and her voice was cold and furious in a way that was actually scary and made me take a step backward toward the stairs. "You think I don't know that you're jealous of me and resentful of the attention that I get from people. You probably called them yourself, didn't you, looking for some way to get me in trouble and make yourself the center of attention and sympathy instead of celebrating the fact that you survived a car accident and should be grateful to be alive." I tried to explain that I had absolutely nothing to do with CPS showing up at our door and that I would never do something like that because I understood how serious the consequences could be. But she was already completely convinced that I was the source of all her problems, and nothing I said was going to change her mind about that. "You know what your problem is, Harper," she continued, and now she was pacing around our living room like a caged animal. "You're bitter and resentful because you're plain and boring compared to me, and you can't stand the fact that I'm still young and beautiful and successful while you're going through this awkward teenage phase where everything about you is just average and forgettable. You try to sabotage me at every opportunity because you're jealous of what I have and what I've accomplished, and frankly I'm getting really tired of dealing with your negativity and your attempts to drag me down to your level." Those words hit me like actual physical blows, and they confirmed every single insecurity and fear that I'd ever had about myself and my worth as a person. She had taken all of my deepest worries about not being good enough or pretty enough or interesting enough, and she had turned them into weapons that she could use against me whenever I stepped out of line or failed to support her version of reality. But more than that, she had revealed something about how she really saw me that I don't think I had fully understood before that moment. She didn't see me as her daughter who deserved love and protection and support. She saw me as competition for attention and admiration, as a threat to her position as the most important and beautiful woman in any room, as someone who might potentially upstage her or take away some of the validation that she needed to feel good about herself. I wasn't her child in her mind, I was her rival, and that realization was more devastating than any of the cruel things she had said about my appearance or my personality. If I thought the hospital photos were going to be the worst part of this entire experience, I was completely unprepared for what happened when I went back to school the following Monday morning. The viral nature of my mum's post meant that basically everyone at Desert Ridge Prep, and probably half of the teenagers in the entire Phoenix metropolitan area, had seen those pictures and formed opinions about what kind of family I came from and what kind of person my mother was. Walking through the hallways felt like being in a fishbowl where everyone was watching and whispering and pointing. But instead of the sympathy and concern that I might have expected after being in a car accident, most of the attention was focused on my mom's behavior and the inappropriate nature of her social media post. The comments and jokes started before I even made it to my first period class, and they continued throughout the entire day without any relief or escape. "Yo, Harper," called out Marcus, who was this senior that I'd never spoken to before and who normally wouldn't have acknowledged my existence in any way. Is your mum starting an OnlyFans account or something? Because those hospital pics were absolutely fire, and she definitely knows how to work the camera. Other kids had taken screenshots of the comments on her original post and were passing them around like trading cards, laughing at the memes that people had created and the parody accounts that had sprung up overnight in response to the viral photos. Someone had actually created a fake Instagram account called Hospital Hot Mom that was already gaining hundreds of followers and posting edited versions of my mum's photos with sarcastic captions that made fun of her behavior and her obvious thirst for attention and validation. The whole situation had taken on a life of its own that was completely beyond my control. And I felt like I was trapped in some kind of nightmare where my family's dysfunction had become entertainment for the entire internet. But the absolute worst part of going back to school wasn't the strangers who were making jokes about my mum or the anonymous accounts that were mocking our family situation. The worst part was seeing how my actual friends reacted to everything that had happened and how their parents had influenced their opinions about my mother and our household. Emma, who was still recovering from her injuries from the car accident and wearing a sling for her broken collarbone, looked at me with this mixture of pity and judgment that made me feel like I had done something wrong. "Harper, I really don't want to make this situation any worse than it already is," she said during lunch, while looking around to make sure nobody else could hear what she was about to tell me. "But my mum saw those photos, and she's really concerned about what's going on in your house. She's been talking to some of her friends who work in social services, and they're all wondering if maybe your mum has some kind of serious problem with attention addiction or narcissistic personality disorder or something like that that needs professional intervention." I wanted to defend my mum and explain that she wasn't a bad person, just someone who had gotten caught up in social media culture and made some poor decisions in a moment of stress and fear. But how do you defend the indefensible? How do you explain to people that your mother using your trauma for Instagram content is somehow normal or acceptable or understandable given the circumstances? The situation got exponentially worse when my mum, instead of laying low and letting the negative attention die down naturally, decided to double down on her victim narrative and fight back against her critics with even more social media content. She posted this long, tearful video that evening where she attempted to explain and justify her behavior while positioning herself as the real victim in this entire situation. "I want to address what happened last night and all of the cruel comments and judgment that my family has received since then," she said in the video, while sitting on our couch with perfect lighting and wearing an outfit that had been carefully chosen to look both modest and flattering at the same time. As a single mother trying to navigate these incredibly difficult situations without any help or support from family or a partner, I don't have anyone to guide me through the right way to handle emergencies or trauma or moments of overwhelming emotion and fear. When my daughter was hurt and I thought I might lose her, I was scared and overwhelmed. And I wanted to share that moment of relief and gratitude with the people who care about our family, because social media is how I connect with my community and my support system. She tagged me in the post with a caption that read, "My beautiful, strong, resilient daughter and I are going through an incredibly difficult time right now as we process this traumatic experience together. Please send us your positive thoughts and healing energy, and please remember that single mothers are doing their absolute best with the resources and support systems that they have available to them. Hashtag single mum life, hashtag stronger together, hashtag mum daughter love, hashtag grateful for our community, hashtag Phoenix family." The video got even more engagement and attention than the original hospital photos had received, with thousands of views and hundreds of comments within the first few hours of being posted. The comments section became this battleground between people defending her as a loving mother who had simply made a mistake under stressful circumstances, and people calling her out for continued inappropriate behavior and attention-seeking, even after being criticized for exploiting her daughter's trauma. Some of her most loyal followers started attacking anyone who expressed concern or criticism, creating this whole online drama that somehow had me at the center even though I hadn't posted anything, or said anything, or done anything to contribute to the conversation. There were entire Twitter threads analyzing her behavior and debating whether she was a narcissist or just someone who had gotten too caught up in social media culture. And I felt like I was watching strangers dissect my family life like we were characters in a reality TV show instead of real people with real feelings. At school the next day, the situation had somehow managed to get even worse than it had been before. Teachers were giving me these pitying looks that made me feel like a charity case. The guidance counselor asked me to stop by her office just to chat and see how I was doing, which felt both caring and embarrassing at the same time. Other students were showing me screenshots of Twitter threads and TikTok videos and Reddit discussions where strangers were analyzing my mother's behavior and making predictions about what kind of person I was likely to turn out to be, given the environment I was growing up in. But the final straw that broke my ability to pretend that everything was fine came when I overheard a conversation between two junior girls in the bathroom, and they were talking about my family like we were characters in some kind of soap opera that they were following for entertainment.